Welcome to Around Town with Ryan Whitney. I'm Ryan Whitney, and this is St. George, Utah. The first people here were the Anasazi Native American people, and their presence is still felt here in St. George, Utah today through their rock art. Nobody really knows why they left, but the next people who showed up were the Paiute Indians. I say they were here, but really they were actually in a nearby community. They used the St. George area actually for more of farming and hunting area. By 1854, settlers from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sent here by Brigham Young, were the first ones to come here to set up a mission and teach the Paiute about their religion. By 1857, Brigham Young was sending more permanent settlements to try to build farms and experiment with what kind of crops would grow down here. By 1861, the American Civil War was in full swing, and the southern states were no longer sending cotton up to the northern cotton mills. Brigham Young, being the leader, thought that this would be a good opportunity and sent a lot of his southern saints, as they called them, down to this area to try to grow cotton, hence the nickname Dixie. Behind me is what locals call Dixie Rock. It's their kind of local sense of pride. St. George is known for its outdoor activities, and it isn't uncommon for you to come here and see people rappelling off of the Dixie Rock. St. George also has an unlimited number of running trails. These trails range from quarter mile long to about 8 miles long. So be sure to check and make sure before you start a trail how far you're actually going. Hiking, climbing, four-wheeling, dirt biking. There's even an Ironman and a marathon here in St. George. Rappelling. There's plenty of outdoor things to do in St. George, but I want to find out a little bit more about the history of it. Let's go see. One of my favorite things to do when I get to a new place is actually just stop the car someplace that looks interesting, get out, take a breath, and look around. One of the best places to do that in St. George is right here on the corner of Main Street and St. George Boulevard. And if you do that, you're bound to notice this building. This was the original courthouse. It's still standing today. It was built during the 1870s, like many of the buildings, out of sandstone that was available in the location. A lot of people think of the Old West and they think of cowboys and their wooden buildings, but they got to remember there wasn't a lot of wood out here. This was a desert, so they had to build with what they had available, and sandstone was something they could get their hands on. They also weren't anarchists, okay? These people wanted their independence, they wanted their freedom, but they also wanted law and order. So building a courthouse was actually one of the primary things that was on their mind. And they built this one around the 1870s. And not too far from here is actually the jail that we'll go visit in just a second, where they would keep you while you were waiting for trial or you were waiting for your punishment. Right next to the courthouse is a museum that was built in 1938 and refurbished in 1985. Now it's run by the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers as a volunteer organization, but you can still come here and see some of the history of St. George. For those who are awaiting their fate, or awaiting what their fate might be at that local courthouse, they would wait right here. This was the local jail. Not sure exactly when it was built, but it's believed that it was built around 1880 by Sheriff Hardy. Later in the 19th century, they built a larger prison, but for the time being, this would have to do. Nowadays, the prison stands in the center of what locals call Ancestor Square. Now, you can still visit the prison, and the prison is surrounded by local eateries, businesses of all different sorts. So you can come and enjoy the day and still see a little bit of St. George history. One of the many St. George adventures you can have right here in Ancestor Square is the Mystery Escape Room. If you think that you're smart or you're good at puzzles, the Mystery Escape Room is a definite must for any visit to St. George. What is the Mystery Escape Room? Well, I'm guessing it's a mystery, but let's go find out. Hey, Ryan Whitney with Around Town with Ryan Whitney.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, so you're the runner of this place? Or?
Yes, I'm the manager of this location.
Okay, well we're looking at historical sites around here, and we noticed that this building looks pretty historical and mystery-escape room. We missed that. So, can you tell us a little bit about the place?
Yeah, we're so glad to have this location. It was built in 1871, built by the first sheriff of St. George, Augustus Hardy. And it's been many things since that time, but the early history of this building was when the sheriff was here. There was a lot of activity that he dealt with, but one in particular I can tell you about that most people come to see when they come to St. George to do the historical tour is there's a door in this lobby that we have. Over there, there's a bullet hole in the door. And you want me to go into the story for just a moment with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. The sheriff housed a prisoner from Leeds for a little while, and some men from Leeds rode down on their horses and shot through the house to get the guy away from the sheriff, not to free him, but to hang him. And they took him outside and hung him not far from this house. It's a colorful story, so we keep this door here with the bullet hole to make sure that people can see it when they come into our business.
Well, now the place is still a functioning business. What business is it here? I've noticed the mystery escape room, and that's kind of ironic being a sheriff's house. What do we do here?
It's an interactive entertainment game. It's an escape game. They've become very popular in the United States over the last few years. It's we set up rooms in the house, these old rooms, and we put clues and riddles and puzzles in the room. And our guests have 1 hour to try to solve the clues and puzzles and figure out how to escape the room. And there's a variety of ways that each room is set with a specific way to escape, but there's a variety of ways in each of our rooms to escape. It could be keys, it could be combinations, it could be demonstrating something to the live monitor that we have watching the rooms. And so there's a number of ways to escape, but it's a very interactive game. And group sizes are usually between 6 and 12 people in a room at any given time.
Do the rooms have some kind of theme that could help give away or clues to what the clues might be?
They do. Each room has a specific theme. Right now we have 2 rooms, and we'll be adding a third. The room themes are Leonardo da Vinci, so you'll find artwork and math and engineering and science type things in there. Not overwhelmingly difficult, but any group can get in there and work together and get out. And then we have a pirate room. It's called Port Royal. It's a pirate mystery, and the guests are to find the hidden flag of Blackbeard before they sail from the port.
Okay, so having a little bit of knowledge of Da Vinci or a little bit of knowledge of Blackbeard might be an advantage before you come in.
It could help, but really what helps most is when people work together and discuss the clues they're working on and solving and combine their efforts to escape.
Definitely teamwork would be the key.
Teamwork's key.
So we've got a group that just figured out the puzzle and made their way out. I'm assuming you guys figured it out.
Yes, we did.
You did? Alright. Which one did you guys do? Did you do the pirate or the...
We did the pirate.
Alright, so you guys were able to figure it out?
Yeah.
Alright. How challenging was it?
It was really hard. It was pretty hard.
Were you at any point thinking that you weren't going to be able to do this?
Some points. I thought we were towards the end, but like at the beginning we were all shaking.
I had about 30 seconds left when we
had one. No, we had 1 second.
Yeah, we had 1 second left. We finished it at 59:59.
59:59? How long do you have to finish it?
60
1 hour. 60 minutes.
60 seconds? Okay, 1 hour.
60 seconds.
Alright.
60 minutes.
So you guys were able to figure, who was the most instrumental in figuring it out?
I feel like it was Caleb. I did the riddle.
The only thing he was screaming at people.
I sensed the tension in the rings here. Now you guys were a birthday party, right? Whose birthday was it?
That's why you were so
Birthday?
smart.
Alright, well, congratulations on figuring it out. And are you guys thinking about coming back and trying the Da Vinci one?
Definitely.
Do you guys think your Da Vinci might be harder than the pirate one?
I'm expecting to do the
It would just be more creative, I feel. Like, that one was creative as well. It would just be more creative than it would be just puzzle.
Absolutely, I think it might be. Alright, thank you very much.
This room is Da Vinci's secret workshop. We start here with the workplace, and then the other room is his study. And in this room there are clues everywhere hidden, and as you find them and solve them, you'll find ways to get into locks and eventually find your way out of the door of his study.
So I kind of noticed that when guys get stuck they do get a little bit of help. Is that the voice of Da Vinci coming down to help them?
Not Da Vinci himself, but members of the Illuminati.
Okay.
We have members of the Order of Enlightenment administering the test, and they will help with our live voice actors, interact with them. Don't give them answers, but they nudge them in case they get stuck.
So don't panic. Da Vinci's spirit is still here, ready to help you get out. So if you're good at puzzles, and you think that you're smarter than Da Vinci or the pirates of old, come to the Mystery Escape Room and battle wits with them. See if you can really measure up to the challenge. Let me see if I can... Right across the street from the Mystery Escape Room is the Main Street Plaza in St. George. All the way down this street you can see all sorts of antique shops, art shows, and if you ever get hungry, cupcakes. There aren't many better places in St. George than 25 Main, right here on Main Street, St. George. We're just across the street from where we were. And if you want to taste a treat or stop in for a sandwich, this is the place to be. If not, where you're more health conscious, right across the street is the Twisted Noodle, where they have more healthy and tasty treats. Just a short walk away from the Main Street Plaza is the St. George Splash Pad. Here your family can come and get their feet wet, soak their toes in a public fountain, and cool off in the hot St. George weather. Surrounding us here at the water park are historical church buildings that the LDS Church actually built as office buildings originally. Now they serve purposes of museums and places where you can learn about the early pioneers and the settlement of St. George and the American West. As you travel down Main Street, you'll notice all sorts of public displays of art that have been put out here for you to be able to see. Most of the artwork actually shows the name of the artist and the theme of the artwork that they've put out. It's something great for you to be able to experience and enjoy as you're exploring St. George. From historical markers to mystery rooms and carousels to splash pads, there's plenty of things to do to start your adventure right here in the heart of St. George. But I'm wondering if there's anything more we can find to do. Behind me is the Brigham Young Home. It was built between 1869 and 1871. And that's probably a pretty average build time in modern times, but during this time, that was actually quite a feat, considering that the wood had to be brought all the way from the Pine Valley Forest, and that was about a two-day trip to get here. Who was Brigham Young? Brigham Young was actually the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he is credited, along with what are commonly called today Mormons, settling the Utah Territory. Now this house is actually his second home. His main home that he resided in was up in Salt Lake. This house was built as his winter home. He would come down here because he was starting to get a little bit older in age and he was suffering from arthritis. And the dry weather and the heat he found was better for his joints. But if you asked him, he might actually even tell you that one of the biggest things he was interested in was the construction of the St. George Temple that we'll talk about and go visit in just a minute. So let's go take a closer look. Come on. Okay, so this is really interesting. So come in close here and check this out. This is the adobe brick. This was actually added later after the initial construction. Brigham Young had this added on before he would move in. But the adobe brick, you could look at it and it's kind of interesting. The settlers that were living here and that built this house for Brigham Young were starving. I mean, the crops were failing, everything was falling apart. And so they started doing kind of scientific experiments with the construction of the house. And when they baked the adobe brick, instead of using straw, which they desperately needed for their animals, you could still see today, if you look closely, the markings of the sagebrush that they used to try to bind the brick together so that it would hold together. Come on, let's look at some more stuff. Okay, now this small structure outside of Brigham Young's house was actually a marking of how with the times that Brigham Young was. Bearing in mind, this guy was the head of a very large church. He was the elected governor of a new territory. He was dealing with the construction of two very large temples that were being built at the time. And so when he came down here to visit St. George, he couldn't just jump back up to Salt Lake to visit. So he had this building constructed next to his house, which was basically like a 19th century telephone. This was actually a telegraph office that Brigham Young had just outside of his home, so every day he could come in and get records of what was going on up at the church offices and the church headquarters up in Salt Lake and the head of the state and state business. When Brigham Young lived here, there were actually orchards surrounding the house on all sides. And what's really cool, a little piece of history, is this tree was actually here during that time. This tree was actually planted in 1871, and it's still here today for visitors to come and see. Now they ask that you don't climb it because she's an old girl, but she is a beautiful tree and a wonderful piece of history. Makes you wonder what kind of things that this tree witnessed. Visitors who come to the Brigham Young home can still take guided tours on the inside. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who volunteer here are more than happy to go ahead and let you look around the inside of the house. So let's go ahead and take a look. So your tour starts actually in the back of the house, where visitors are actually reminded of the reason that St. George is often referred to as Dixie. The cotton plant is right there for visitors to experience, reminding people why the settlers originally came down here. Now, the cotton crop actually failed, but the name Dixie, from all the southern settlers that came here, stuck. And by the time the crop failed, St. George was already settled. So it was going to be here to stay. Visitors from the pioneer era would have actually come through this door. Now, the carpenters that built this house actually didn't like the soft woods that were available. So these doors are actually made out of those old soft woods, but they're painted to look like eastern hardwoods, which the carpenters were more accustomed to working with. The rooms were built to impress. This open entryway was where visitors might come to wait for an audience with Brigham Young. The piano actually wasn't here during Brigham Young's time. It was actually shipped out while he was still alive, but never arrived at the home until after he passed away. Heavy stones were hard to come by, but carpenters during the time had no lack of imagination and actually painted wood to look like marble. Doesn't that look like a convincing marble fireplace for all intents and purposes? Most of the furniture in the home now is actually from after Brigham Young's time. Very little of what was actually here when he was still exists today. But it's not hard to imagine how his dining room might have been set up while Brigham Young still lived here. And again, we get another example of a fireplace made out of wood but painted to look like marble. Dining would have been a social experience for Brigham Young and his family. And the fine china would certainly come out for anybody of any note that would come to visit. Though there were some hard feelings between Utah settlers and the United States government at the time, Utah settlers still did everything they could to show their patriotism. American flags and tributes to George Washington were very commonplace. The kitchen is actually one of the smaller rooms in Brigham Young's home. It was a place where meals were quickly made and quickly served. This chair is actually one of the few things in the home that was actually here when Brigham Young was. But it survived an awful lot of history, was badly damaged and then later restored. Visitors can still come and see it today. Staircases during the 19th century were not made to modern housing specs. The staircase here, right outside of the kitchen and in between the dining room, is very tight, very cramped, and very steep. The servants' bedroom is still here, and you can still see how Brigham Young's servants would have lived while they lived with Brigham Young. The room is actually of decent size, but the ceilings were very, very low. And in the corner of the servants' quarters, you see some of the trappings and some of the tools of 19th century America. The spinning wheel, a period chair, again, more cotton, and a demonstration on how seeds were actually separated by hand from cotton before the invention of the cotton gin. And in the corner, you'll notice a small doll that's been placed there. Now, some might find this doll almost disturbing until you know the story behind it. This is one of many dolls that was actually made by a pioneer from the early days of the settling of St. George, who came in and found that the settlers were so poor that the children had no presents for Christmas. And he made these small handmade dolls for the children to have something on Christmas morning. Some of the children were so excited that they even cut their own hair and glued it to the top of the doll's head so that the doll would have some hair. Again, cotton was never a successful crop in St. George, though they really hoped it would be. Before the invention of the cotton gin, the cotton seeds had to be separated from the cotton by hand. These two paddles scraped together, making an awful sound and irritating sensation through the hands, for hours on end is the only method that they had at that time for separating the cotton seeds. Cotton gins did exist during the settlement of St. George, but they were difficult to get out to such a remote location. So for many of the early settlers, this was the only method they had. In the absence of indoor plumbing, this would serve as your morning sink. If that beautiful porcelain pot at the end of the bed looks interesting to you, it's because it's a chamber pot. In the cold of the dark in the middle of the night and you needed to use a restroom, didn't have indoor plumbing. That was where you went. You stored it till the morning when you dumped it out. The rest of the time it was saved underneath the bed. But it saved you a trip to the bathroom, right? The hope chest, or pirate-looking chest, was the last thing that went onto the wagon and the first thing that came off. All of the most prized possessions and necessary possessions were usually stored in these very well-made hope chests that would last, obviously, all the way up until today. Armoires were all the rage in early America, and they didn't go out of style for quite some time. The reason being is that the British, back when we were part of England, used to tax us based on how many rooms were in the house. So in order to avoid being taxed for a closet, you'd simply get an armoire, put your clothing in there, and you wouldn't have to pay the tax on the extra room in your house. The term armoire comes from where it sounds like. They used to carry the old suits of armor for men's. Now they carry suit coats and dresses, and odds and ends that you might need. Brigham Young's bedroom also served as an office for him. He was always busy. Again, the head of a major religion, a governor, elected governor of a new state, and owner and president of multiple different businesses. He was always busy. Now, if the bed actually looked a little bit short to you, and maybe even a little bit high to you, there were actually two very good reasons for that. Well, I say very good reasons, but very good reasons to the pioneers. Not so much to us. For one, the bed was short because they didn't really make them king size and queen size. They made them as they needed them. And the bed would just be big enough for Brigham Young to sleep in. Also, Brigham Young would not need necessarily a full-size bed for him to sleep in because during this era he would have slept sitting up as much as possible, which is also why the bed is so high up off the ground. See, they believed in two things about sleeping. One is that germs settled close to the ground, so you wanted to sleep up away from the ground as much as you could. So you'd sleep on a tall bed and you'd sleep sitting up. Now, this isn't necessarily true. Modern science has kind of debunked this belief. The other belief is that if you laid sleeping flat on your back all the time, eventually fluids would build up in your lungs, you'd get pneumonia and get sick. Now, there's a little bit of truth to this. If you stay in a hospital for any length of time, the doctor will come in without asking you and move your bed up so that you're sitting up for the very same reason.
pioneer era, they didn't have any idea of how long that would take, and they weren't willing to take a risk with it. So we slept in a short bed, sleeping straight up as much as humanly possible. And for that reason, the beds were shorter and taller.
This is one of the most amazing spots in St. George, and this is the St. George Temple. I promised we'd come here. This building was started on construction in 1871, and they completed in 1877. And interestingly enough, this temple is actually the oldest still operating temple in the LDS or Mormon faith. It is a beautiful building, especially when you consider the sacrifice that went into making it. The early settlers that came here, as I've already discussed, were starving. They were broke. Their crops were failing, and yet they still dedicated their time and their talents and their money and their effort to building this absolutely beautiful building behind me. Some of the interesting things about this building is that the grounds chosen in 1871 were actually very swampy. This was actually kind of a marsh back in those days. And so what they had to do was they took a lot of the volcanic rock that's very common around here, and they actually used a cannon as a pile driver to crush up the rock and mush it into the swamp, drain it out so that they can build the temple on stable foundation. That beautiful spire you see actually came down during a lightning storm not very long after its completion and was rebuilt even taller and better than it was before. So this temple was built just like most of the buildings around here out of sandstone, and then they would paint it white. Now if you look up, you could see those beautiful chimney looking things up there. Those actually are chimneys. When Brigham Young first had this building built, traveling guests could actually come and stay in very small rooms that were along the edges of the temple. They were very thin, narrow rooms, but they had their own fireplaces to warm up those traveling guests as they came. A lot of mystique tends to surround Mormon temples, but Mormons don't really like it that way. They want people to be able to come and visit of all faiths, and they actually have built a visitor center that you can actually come and ask any question you want, and they have volunteers full-time that will be happy to help you out with anything that you want to know. They're more than happy to talk to you about the history of the temple, what the temple purposes are, and why it was so important for those early pioneers to sacrifice so much for such a beautiful building when they themselves were living in mud hovels, really. One of the hidden gems of St. George is the Kayenta Art Village. Now, this is a hidden away place, so finding it might be a little bit difficult. But once you do find it, there is plenty of art, sculptures, paintings, and perspective work for you to be able to come and enjoy. So come on in, have something to eat, and enjoy some of the artwork that's here in Kayenta. I think I'll go around. I honestly don't think any trip to St. George would be really complete without at least one visit to the Tuacahn Theater. It's located technically in Ivins, which is just a little bit outside of St. George, but surrounded by these beautiful mountains, red rocks, and canyons. It's an outdoor theater and a real experience that's really unique to St. George that you can't get really anywhere else that I could think of. One of the staples of St. George, Utah are its many farmers markets and craft fairs. One of the most fun is right here at Tuacahn. It runs every Saturday all the way through the summer. One of the great things that the Tuacahn Theater actually can boast that not many other theaters of this caliber can is that it is an outdoor theater. It's not just an outdoor theater like you go out and see at a park or something of that nature. It's an outdoor theater where you can actually get a top-notch performance in a much more relaxed atmosphere than you can really anywhere else. Now, what's great about it is that you could still get these top-notch performances here at the Tuacahn, but the relaxed atmosphere is absolutely noticeable everywhere you go. Before the show, they're actually even selling waters and sodas and ice creams to the audience to enjoy during the show. But the performances don't lack anything of any other theater that you can go to. As a matter of fact, in a lot of ways, it's a little bit better because of the outdoor experience. So we're here with Violet, who's the company manager, and Matt, who is the marketing manager, and they just agreed to actually show us around and answer a few questions. So I guess the first thing is Tuacahn. Unique name.
Yes, Tuacahn.
Where did it come with the Tuacahn?
Now, Tuacahn is a name that means Canyon of the Gods. Any of you who have been here know that Tuacahn is a beautiful canyon with red rocks and has great acoustics for the show, and that's the name. It's a completely made-up name, so don't believe anyone who tells you otherwise. What do you have to say about Tuacahn, Matt?
Yeah, basically it came from two Mayan words, ATwRW, Canyon of the Gods. Kind of just mashed it up.
Yep.
That's a reoccurring theme around St. George, for sure. So how long has it been here?
Tuacahn has been here since 1995, so it's been here about 21 years now, and we've done shows ever since then, starting with Utah, and then moving into more musical shows. And now we're huge. We have our Broadway in the Desert series, and we do 3 shows every year, sometimes 4 in the Indoor Hafen Theater, which we don't have this year. But yeah, so we had our 20th anniversary last year, so we're really making time out here.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're an outdoor theater, obviously, and you're kind of known for some wire work with some of your performances, like Wizard of Oz,
Yes.
and things like that. Did that take a lot of ingenuity, or
The flying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so some shows are written with flying involved. So Tuacahn, we have such a great canyon to work with. We can fly people down from the canyon, fly people over the house, fly them above the stage, which a lot of shows aren't able to do. So you'll see some of that tonight when you watch Tarzan.
I would say that's a pretty unique experience to see people flying in open air.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything about the history of Tuacahn that you guys wanted to share?
Well, not other than it started as a vision and has turned into quite the spectacle of what it is now, and has grown into what no one could have expected. So it's a great theater. We offer concerts, we hold events here, we have our shows, we also have Tuacahn High School, which is a charter school, so it's really grown into much more than it ever thought it was going to be.
Absolutely, that is absolutely awesome. Most of the plays and performances here at the Tuacahn are family friendly, but there are a few that might contain themes or storylines that might make mom and dad a little bit nervous with their young ones. So be sure when you call the box office to ask which performances might be appropriate for children. Also, if you're worried about the cost of tickets here, they actually vary in prices quite a bit. You can actually click on the link below and see what you can afford. We've seen historical places and modern places. We've seen beautiful examples of architecture. We've seen incredible things here in St. George, both interactive and for entertainment purposes. I think it's safe to say that there is plenty to do here in St. George, Utah for everybody in the family.